afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session titled Cyber Hygiene 101, Easy Ways to Repel Attacks Targeting You and Your Family. Brought to you by our good friends at BlackCloak. My name is Grant Sims, and I'm a family wealth strategist here at TFO Wealth Partners, and we appreciate you taking the time today to be with us. Before I introduce our presenter, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, all participants are muted and your videos are turned off for your privacy. Second, for the best experience, please use the speaker view rather than the gallery view, and you can select that up in the right-hand corner. Third, at the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions, and there is a question and answer box in the bottom of your screen where you can submit your questions. Go ahead and put those in as the content comes up throughout the presentation, and we will make sure that we answer as many of them as we can at the end. Finally, a recorded version of this webinar will be available to share in the next week or so, so be on the lookout for this. And if you found this webinar information valuable, please feel free to share with your friends and family that you think would benefit from today's topic. Additionally, for those that have not heard, we here at TFO are covering topics like this and many others on our new podcast, the Wealth and Purpose Podcast, hosted by our president, Brady Fineski. If you'd like to view those episodes, you can do so through our YouTube page at youtube.com/TFO Wealth or through our website at tfo.com/podcast. If you prefer to listen to the podcast episodes, the Wealth and Purpose Podcast is available on all of the major podcasting platforms. That wraps up all of our announcements and housekeeping. And as we enter into our topic today, what we want to say is that beyond some of the other issues going on in the world, one of the topics and worries we hear time and time again from the families that we serve is cybersecurity and keeping their families, especially their children, safe. To address this, we're excited to welcome Ingrid Gliatone, Chief Experience Officer at BlackCloak, which is a concierge cybersecurity and privacy protection platform that helps families and executives safeguard their digital lives. In her role, Ingrid ensures clients have true peace of mind, knowing their families are protected from cyber attacks, financial fraud, and identity theft. Named one of Cyber Defense Magazine's top women in cybersecurity, she's known for creating what she calls the Genius Bar of cybersecurity, making digital protection understandable for both experts and beginners. Ingrid, we're thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for sharing your time, and we can't wait to hear what you have.
Grant, thanks for having me. Hit a few key items. First, we're going to talk about the cyber threat landscape. Then we're going to go into how these attacks actually happen, things that you can be looking out for, and easy solutions that you can take to increase your defenses. And then we'll wrap up with some interactive sessions at the end, and then lastly some question and answers. So to start, that cyber threat landscape, let's see what we're looking at. And I like to always start with especially what we see here within BlackCloak. When we have members come to us, what we're finding is 20% of them have homes. Their home networks are open, accessible to individuals from the internet. 70% of households come leveraging active passwords, and those passwords also being on the dark web, available to cyber criminals and available to someone to be able to compromise your accounts. 76% are having not adjusted settings on their mobile devices and other computers, so they're oversharing and leaking information unknowingly. 87% have never had any sort of protection software on a mobile device before. And then even some people are coming to us, around almost 40%, hacked or compromised in some way, where bad actors are either on their home networks, in email accounts, have malware on devices already as we're seeing them. And this just kind of, to hit the nail even further, is across the industry, this is what we're seeing. It's a $16 billion industry and growing. The Internet Crimes Complaint Center, IC3, put this out there. And as you can see, some of the most top, prevalent crimes that are happening are around social engineering. So those phishing emails, those, vishing, those voicemails that you get are massive. And it's just growing. And this report is for only it's known reported issues of crime, never mind the ones that go unreported. So it's even bigger than the 16 billion. And again, it's still growing. And now with the rise of the AI and others, it's just going to continue, I believe, to skyrocket. And hence why everybody needs to be kind of stay aware on that. And so why would you and your families be at risk? Well, of course, bad actors can go off to, financial institutions and other corporations and target them, for monetary purposes and stuff. But you know what they can do, which is a lot easier, is going after individuals in their personal life. Why? Because we don't have the enterprise grade controls that corporations and large organizations have, right? We've got the consumer grade products. It's a quick, fast, easy reward. They're relying on the human and human trust and not all of these, bolstered defenses. And on top of it, your personal information is everywhere online, both on the internet and out there on the dark web due to the, plethora of breaches that we've had over the years. And as I said, the consumer grade solutions that we have access to, going to say your local Best Buy and so forth, they're just not as robust as the enterprise grade products. And while most of us are trying to balance work and personal, you also don't ever want to have your work involved in what your personal life is doing. And so you cannot take advantage of those, workplace security controls. And the homes themselves are just increasingly vulnerable with all of the various technology that we're putting in, from Internet of Things to home camera systems, home automation systems. It just runs the gamut. And so it's out there, widely flowing. We're not looking at our home networks to ensure that they're properly secured. We don't know everything that our children and our family members, our parents, our, spouses, our kids are doing. And so it's just opening us up to more, susceptibility to be targets of an attack. And again, these are just, the variety of different ways that bad actors can come in, and it's just continuing to involve in the ways that they target you through ransomware and other things. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But to start, how do the attacks happen, right? And so the first is they target you first. What they do is they call it open source intelligence gathering. When they're going after a target, they're going to look and see what's available online that I can have easy access to, right? They'll do Google searches and internet. And one of the big widely available things on the internet is information about you from data brokers or people aggregator sites. So that is the 411s, the whitepages.com, Fast People Search, My Life. Those are just some examples of data brokers. And they collect their information from public record data that's out there and readily accessible. They also capture it from third-party marketing materials and other data sources. And they'll pull together that information and create profiles and dossiers about you that when you go to that website and you put in your name, it might have your name, your age, it might have known email addresses about you, phone numbers for you, current and former addresses, known associations for relatives and other family members. So they pull this all together, right? And they have all this information. So when they go out and they do it, an attack against you, they sound much more legitimate and valid because they have all this known information, right? And so that's just what's readily accessible on the internet doing a Google search. And then they'll go after you and search for you and exposures on the dark web, the criminal underground, right? I call it like that black market. And that's where your personal information is sold in exchange. All the various data breaches that have happened over the years end up getting dumped on the dark web because people want the keys to the kingdom, right? Your passwords to get into your accounts, whether that be your financial accounts. And most people think, oh, they just want my money. They want that, but they also are looking for your email accounts, right? Because think of all the data that flows through it. It's not just your financial, information, access to banks and credentials. It's personal data. It's health data that's going through your email accounts. So they're wanting those stolen passwords to get into all the variety of accounts. And then they'll also target you based on your password management practices and behaviors, right? So if they find a password about you on the dark web, they're going to start and see, did they find a second password? Is there any sort of similarities or commonalities between them? Are you using some sort of algorithm? Are you just iterating and changing the last few digits on that password? And so they will reuse things that are exposed that they found on the dark web to go after accounts that they know that you've owned. And again, it's all part of their intelligence gathering techniques that they do. And then once they've kind of figured out and pinpointed their target, they'll go through a variety of different ways to kind of compromise you. So that's voicemail, phishing, social engineering. Smishing is the SMS, the text message phishing, all the spam emails that we get, hoping that you'll click that link and, oh, your delivery didn't arrive on time, USPS or FedEx, click this link, validate information. You might click the link and they might download malicious software. You might click the link and it might send you to a page where they're going to capture personal information or other credentials that they will then use to target you and compromise an account. They'll also take advantage of the fact that if you don't have antivirus or anti-malware software on your devices, mobile devices, and computers, they'll take advantage of the fact if you haven't updated or kept your devices up to date. Apple is notorious for 0-day vulnerabilities. Last year, there was, I want to say, like 5 or 6, all in the matter of a month. It was like almost every week we were pushing out a cyber alert saying, go ahead and update your mobile device, your iOS, and while Apple has, for example, the auto updates on, there are some caveats with that, is that 9 times out of 10, your device has to have a certain amount of battery life, be plugged in and not in use over a period of typically when you're sleeping, and your fingers crossed and hope that your device actually updates, right? But you as a user can also go ahead and push that update proactively. And so we want to keep people engaged and, proactively push that. And then the other way that they will go out and target you is, when you're going off to your coffee shop or if you're traveling and you're connecting to public Wi-Fi, right? Consider public Wi-Fi. It's like this big sort of open kind of room that everybody can see the conversations that are being had, hearing and listening of the data being exchanged. And so none of your information is private so if you're connecting to public Wi-Fi, logging into your email or logging into your bank account, everybody can see that. Someone can be capturing all of those, details as you're going. So using things like a VPN, a virtual private network, when you're on those is a good idea, but we'll get into some easy solutions in a little bit. And the other aspect that I like to talk about is not even public Wi-Fi, but your personal home Wi-Fi. Do you have a guest network set up? When people come over, are they connecting to do you have one network and everybody connects to it? So if they come into your home network, right, connect to it and their device is compromised, bad actors can then connect onto your network and pivot and connect on and spread malware or other things onto other devices on that network. But having a guest network would help you to segregate it. So again, they're taking advantage of not putting up these robust defenses even in your home. I like to highlight this, and this is actually kind of personal for me and very timely. Over the past week, some perfect examples of just how sophisticated cyber criminals are and how good they are at what they do and how legitimate it looks. On the left-hand side, you see the Bank of America. This is an email that was received, right? And it looks legit. It's got the Bank of America logo. Everything's great, right? And that's a phishing email. And no fault of anybody else's, it's hard to tell the difference of what's true and what's not. And on the right-hand side, I had a personal personal event last week, a family member of mine, and I will preface this is someone who has years in the corporate world, worked in the fraud industry, getting up in age, unfortunately. She had logged into her Amazon account, and this popped up in her Amazon account. This is actually a storefront page. We call it like malvertising and ad work, like a campaign that bad guys posted this. So for all intents and purposes, she wasn't on the wrong Amazon site. She was in the correct Amazon account. And she took this as valid and ended up being on the phone with the bad actors, handing over some personal information that, we had to do some damage control after that. But I had to tip my hat to the bad guys because this was impressive. It's kind of, hadn't really seen this, type of tactic being leveraged before, but now it's something that we're keeping, an eye out. And for everybody here on this call, I would say, especially with the holidays coming up, and I'm sure, with Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming, you might be in your Amazon account a whole lot more. If you see this, don't call the phone number. Okay. But again, it's just showing how legitimate and how real these things are. And you should not ever beat yourself up if you fall victim to something like this, because again, it is, truly remarkable, what they do. And then, we talk about the home, and I've kind of alluded to it when I talk about home networks and other things, but bad guys will target your homes, right? Because again, it doesn't have the same robust controls as a corporation or enterprise network. have you ever gone into your home network and looked at your router, credentials? Is it still using the default passwords that it was set up with? Because all your Wi-Fi networks and routers typically, now they're kind of changing, but a lot of majority will be set up with username and password. That is the actual credentials, or password. And even more so, if someone knows the router that you're using at your home, they can do a Google search for those default credentials online. They have websites upon websites with that information, and they can just kind of target and try and get in. Camera systems, whether you're having really robust camera systems in your home network, sometimes depending upon how the camera company went and installed it, they can leave things open for support purposes and allow an entry point, because they're thinking of a service component of it, not the security component of it. And then, are you making sure that you're updating and patching? And some other camera systems, I have clients that come to us and they're using more cloud-based camera systems, but where that gets into problems is their password management practice and dual factor authentication on those accounts, and not having those things in place and allowing a bad actor, from the cloud to be able to access their camera feeds. And then again, as I mentioned, no Wi-Fi, no guest networks, and they haven't gone through and properly upgraded and patched the Wi-Fi routers and things that they're using in their homes. And all of these things are ways or entry points in for a bad actor into your home network. And then I kind of alluded to that, tech support scam, because that's exactly what it was with that Amazon account. But they'll come through, and a lot of times these happen where, and what I thought had initially happened with my family member was that she did a Google search, came up and, called a phone number, because bad guys will use SEO, search engine optimization, to essentially put and list their, websites or information at the top of a Google search. So if you're, say, searching for Comcast or Verizon or whatever it be, right, you find a phone number. I had another client a couple weeks back. They were having to reset up their home networks in their beach house. So they were calling Xfinity Comcast. They went and did a Google search. They found the phone number. Someone picked up on the first call, right? That never happens. How many, numbers do you have to press to actually get to a human, right? But in the moment, they were like, oh, this is great. I've fast support. They gave a bunch of information. They received a text message code to them, and they were, giving it. So essentially the bad guys, while they were on the phone, were going in and accessing their Xfinity and Comcast account, because again, it was the tech support scam that they fell. And then reversely, instead of you searching, the phone number might come in. Bad actors will spoof phone numbers and purport to be, from a company, or, the phone number coming in, and you pick it up and they say, I'm from, wherever it be, and you then fall victim to it. So know that, again, they're good at what they do. These are large kind of criminal organizations that are run. They're businesses in and of themselves. And then social media scams. There's a variety of those things running rampant, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Someone might message you. You might receive a friend request. It could be from a friend of yours that you're already connected with, and they say, I got locked out of my account. Connect with me. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Bad actor could be, spoofing or, creating an impersonated account, trying to get a hold of you to then connect. Then they'll typically direct message you. They might ask, and for personal information, they might say, I need money. Can you send me a gift card? The bad guys love gift cards, because you can't, banks can't pull that money back. Once the gift card's out there, it's out there. So again, be alert when you're on social media. And then extortion, we got a lot of fake emails that come through that say, I've been watching you. I know what you've been doing. I've, seen your camera, blah, 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 pay me Bitcoin. So that's out there. They create and strike some sense of fear and urgency with you. That's kind of one of their main tactics. And then they'll kind of say, we have your children. A lot of the AI impersonations, right, and deep fake stuff that we're seeing now is they're taking, voices. They'll either be monitoring because, your social media profiles, for example, might be public and accessible to everyone. Your videos, your TikToks and everything, that they're able to pull those images, the likeness, that voice, then, serve it up in a targeted attack against you, where they think that they have your child. There was actually in the news, a woman lost $15,000 and paid out criminals because she thought that they had her daughter and it was just a kidnapping scam, but it was just an AI deep fake and stuff. We actually had, from a corporate perspective, there was a finance employee who had been on a Zoom call with what was purported to be the CFO and ended up paying out, like, I think it was like $21 million in payout, and it was a deep fake of the CFO, right? So there's just, it happens in the personal, it happens in the corporate world. So just things to keep mindful of. And again, how do you spot these attacks? What are the red flags that you can look out for as they're happening? Well, particularly if someone has access to your financial accounts or your credit cards and stuff, one of the biggest things to look is for micro deposits, small deposit amounts first and foremost, right? Small transactions that don't hit the threshold that a fraud department at a financial institution or a credit card company would look at first and foremost. And it's below the radar with all of your other stuff, so it doesn't, hit your, you don't spot that immediately. And then they'll be doing that for a little bit and then bam, hit you. Password changes, resets, or a inundation of spam emails or things, like an influx of that can, cause havoc, create chaos. You're getting blended into the mix of the actual target that's happening. The urgency piece, as I mentioned before, especially with, the emails, I've been watching you, or I see what you're doing, or, I have your child and it's a ransomware, again, creating a sense of urgency, creating a sense of fear. Those are all things I try to say in the heat of the moment. It's hard to kind of, take a step back, but where you can take a step back and breathe and be like, is there other avenues I can take to confirm the legitimacy of this? Can I phone call, a family member? Can I phone call my financial institution? Can I send an email or a text to somebody else to determine legitimacy? Here at Black Cloak, we do a lot of that for our members, where they will, forward on stuff to us, phone call, concerns, text messages, emails, and we can help, determine that legitimacy and kind of ebb those, quash those fears. In particular with devices, if devices have become compromised, what you'll note is you'll start to see them like operating really slow, your network's really slow, or the device itself seems to be like overheating, or like powering, like even the fan speeds on a computer can be an indicator that not just that, your device is old, but that it's powering something more unbeknownst to you. And then the other aspect we see, and this is, I would say, really in when someone's been in your email, is there's data missing, right? There's emails missing that you thought that you had that are no longer there, because what bad actors will do is they'll either delete it altogether, or they will like create forwarding rules and different rules within your email to completely hide, so that when an email comes in, it automatically gets moved to trash and deleted, or it gets pushed and sent out somewhere else. So again, just things to be aware of and to look out for. And so with that, what are some of the things that you can do to kind of, make yourself less of a target, bolster those defenses? First and foremost, if we go back to, how did the bad actors initially target you? They target you based on information that's out there on the internet. Well, removing yourself from, say, those people search, data broker sites is a really good first step of that. Black Cloak, does that for our members, but there are also other services out there alone, because I would tell you there are hundreds upon hundreds of data brokers, people search sites out there. They all have different ways and processes by which they go and allow requests for opt-out. So it's almost like a full-time job to do that without using and leveraging some type of service for the data broker removal piece. And another caveat is, because they're sourcing their information from public records and other third-party databases, if they remove your information, they will absolutely go back and find it later on, whether that's a week from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, and put that information back on and create a net new profile on you on their website. So we call it mowing the grass, because, we're constantly trying to reduce that attack surface. And then the other piece is, oversharing. I mentioned, on social media sites, when you join the likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, these are all public sites. They're free to join, right? And because they're free to join, they're going to freely share your information. And so all of your profiles by default are public on these sites. And you have to, as the individual user, go in on the back end and change and adjust settings so that you're not oversharing, and you just say maybe share with friends or friends of friends, right? There's also an option, if you want more privacy, with your home on, places like Google Maps and Bing, you can blur the image of your home in that street view. Now, I have clients, it's a truly a personal preference, I will say. And if you're in an apartment building complex, you're not going to be able to, have it blurred because it's you and, a million other people potentially in that apartment complex. But for your personal individual homes, some people like it because they don't want their home being seen, and others say, well, if I'm the only home on the street with a blur, does that make me more of a target? So again, those are things that we, talk to our clients about and have discussions on. Then there are real estate sites, right? Like your Zillows, your Redfins, Realtor.com. Going to the MLS listing, if your home has ever been sold or purchased, they have images, right? External and internal images of your home that are out there. In order to get those taken down, you do have to contact the MLS, listing and the agent that happened to have that removed. But it's another way so people don't have an internal like blueprint of what the inside of your home looks like, right? Bad actors might use that for, casing the joint for a physical attack or some, stealing and so forth. And then we have a lot of clients that come to us, how do I make my home just more private and my address more private in general, right? And so that's when you go and purchase a home, you want to consider purchasing a home in a trust or an LLC, and do not make the mistake of naming the trust or LLC your family name, because it just keeps you back as a target. And I have had clients that have come on, a CEO in particular who had their home as a, last name, family last name, trust, and it was like, why are they finding me? Well, you made it very easy for them. And then PO boxes. I have a lot of clients that will, use PO boxes and share that out instead of their personal home address. It's another great way so people aren't actually, having your address, your personal address. And then last but not least, that oversharing piece, with your devices, and even in your home, like your computer browsers, you might be sharing location information from apps and on the mobile devices themselves. So being able to pull back what apps have access, on your mobile devices to your location data. And if it's a general location or precise location, though all of those things can make you less of a target, right? And then, getting into your accounts, if you don't change your password management practices and you choose to continue to reusing passwords or having an algorithm, please enable dual factor authentication wherever it's available. And we like to take the approach of email accounts first and foremost. I say like that's really like the bailiwick of everything. And then financial, then social media and healthcare accounts, and having dual factor on them. And when dual factor was first implemented, the common option was SMS, right? You got a code texted to your phone. Well, the bad guys have seen this now for a number of years, and they've gotten savvy enough to know I can call up AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, wherever you have, your phone with, and I can port your phone number. It's called SIM swapping. I can change the SIM card and swap that and change your number to go to my device. And you don't receive those calls or text messages in the process. And therefore, they can intercept those text messages, and in particular, intercept the dual factor authentication codes that you would be receiving that way. So the other option that we highly recommend and advocate our clients move to is using an authenticator app. And there are some great apps out there, like there's Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator is offering, there's Duo, there's Authy, but leveraging an authenticator app. And the reason why that is more secure, it's an app local on your device that even if your phone number gets ported or changed over, it stays local to you. And so they can intercept that code, right? So just something to think about. So highly recommend dual factor authentication. And then taking it one step further, using an encrypted password manager, and for a lot of folks, it's overwhelming with all the hundreds upon hundreds of passwords that we have. Like, where do I start? I always say, yes, you want to get to a point where you have unique and really long passwords, across all of your various accounts. But to start, especially with a password manager, get used to using the tool first. So import and put in your current, passwords that you have, and then go through and change, just like with dual factor. change it on your email first and use the password manager just for accessing the email. So you get comfortable using the tool, you get comfortable on how you go about generating new passwords, and then you can get into a habit and new routine of leveraging the password manager. And I love password managers because one, especially if you choose to go outside of, say, the Apple password manager or a Google, right? And because I just don't like giving everything to one entity. I feel like if I have my passwords with Apple and something were to happen with Apple, they just have it all, right? And same thing with Google if I store everything in Google. So I like using an independent third party that operates across different platforms, especially if I have a Windows computer, I have an iPhone or an iPad, they're platform agnostic. I can have the password manager on each of those different platforms and devices, and they can sync up and back to the cloud and have that all, talking to each other where Apple and Windows, together don't play nice in the sandbox, but now I have that intermediary for it. And again, one of the things that I also say for passwords, and I like to tell folks is it's shown with research that the longer the password, the harder and longer it takes for bad actors to figure it out. And so, gone are the days it used to be like 8 characters, and then it's like 14, and I don't know if it's up to 20 is ideal, right? And so if someone's like, well, how do I figure out and use a 20 character password? And I have to have, complexity and all of this other stuff. And when I say complexity, an upper character, a lowercase character, a special character like an exclamation point, a question mark, a numeric character. I suggest using short sentences or phrases. They're easy to remember, right? And so it's better than I call the gobbledygook of passwords where I have like a couple different things all together and trying to remember them. So that's my little tidbit. Make sure you do long, strong passwords that way. And then protecting your devices. A lot of people have the misconception that Apple and Mac computers are not susceptible to viruses. And while I would say kind of historically that may have been true, it was only true because they didn't own the primary share of the market in the consumer market for those devices. Back in the day, Microsoft and Windows were the big players. Then Apple came into the mix and Apple is taking over. So they are ripe for the taking as well. And also we've seen Macs and devices with malware on them. So having antivirus, anti-malware software, even if it's consumer grade, it's better than nothing. I will tell you that. And making sure that you're keeping everything up to date, because as soon as you run a device that's in, with an, outdated operating system, or in the Apple world, well, Apple has built some phenomenal machines that can last the test of time, like years upon years. Apple stops supporting certain operating systems. It's like, I think they operate and manage the latest 5 or something. And after that, so you could be on a device that the device itself is perfect, but Apple can't support it on any new operating system. So you are left vulnerable. They will not send security patches. So consider after periodically, if you're on a device like that, moving up and getting a new device. And then last but not least, this goes back to more of the social engineering piece, but be cognizant about what's being sent to you. Don't click or download things that are suspicious or, not from people that you trust. And even if I even approach it, I'm uber conservative of even family members, when they send something to me, I'm like, did you mean to send this? If I wasn't expecting it, I'm going to kind of go out of band and question them. They sometimes roll their eyes at me and I'm like, well, I'd rather be safe than sorry. So and then home networks. I talked about it, having a guest network. And one of the things also is, what is the name of your home network? Do you have, is it your family name or something that could be identifying to you? When you go and you connect to your Wi-Fi's and you see your neighbor's Wi-Fi and you're like, oh, that's the Smiths next door, or that's the Joneses across the street, right? They've made it an easy way to target them to know that that's your home network. So having a network that is entirely different and different named and unique is a good idea. And having that guest network set up where you have, visitors and folks coming into your home connect to that guest network. If your network is even so robust as to have another network that you could segment out and have all of your Internet of Things, your smart devices on it, if they were to become compromised, then they're isolated and they're not, connecting to other important devices on that private network. Keeping those Internet of Things, those smart devices up to date is also really important. And then for those of you that have leveraged home automation system providers, audiovisual providers, camera, companies to come into your homes. Make sure you've talked to them about not only just the service and support and connectivity, but the security that they've implemented around it. And that's where, at Blackhawk, we do a lot of consulting with our clients and home networks, especially because one of the things that we do is we monitor home networks for vulnerabilities and openings. And if we can get into something, 9 times out of 10, it's a camera system or a home automation system that we're able to get access to. That's where it's a really good idea to just have those conversations. And then deepfake scam. So as I mentioned, so I was wrong. It wasn't 21, it was $25 million that the finance worker, paid out. But there's just a variety of different, things going on with the deepfakes and AI scams right now. So it's really important, to validate any request you see going out of band, like a different, way. So if they call you by phone, try a text message or an email. Within your families, consider a code word. Establish a code word in your household. So say you were that woman that got conned out the 15 grand, right? Because she thought they had her daughter. She could have been saying, I want to speak to her. What's the code word? Tell me what the code word is so I know that you have her. If they can't tell you the code word, then you can almost be rest assured that it's more than likely a scam and not legitimate. And then again, all of these are going to create some sense of urgency, some scare tactics. So just avoid the urge to immediately jump in and try to solve the solution. Take a breath and slow down a bit. And then specifically for deep fakes with respect to that occurring on social media, because again, who you're connecting with, if your profiles are public, there's a lot of information that can be gathered and correlated and pulled together to create deep fake scams. Be cognizant of who you're connecting with, limit what you're sharing. If you end up falling victim, or someone that falls victim to a scam, contact your local law enforcement. The social media sites themselves have reporting mechanisms by which you can report to them on anything, as well as those involving minors. Because what we're seeing is a lot of times that the kids are posting stuff and everything's great, but then they're taking explicit content and layering that over images of your children. So it's not even like your children's gone and like did something silly, it's the fact that they've actually just put somebody else's image over, the face of your child. And that can create a lot of issues, reputation wise, security wise for you and your family, just things to be mindful of. And so it's so important. I have on here having conversations with your children, but given what I just went through last week, I would also say it's incredibly important to have conversations across your family member base, like young and old, about this, and that the scams are happening, and that for them to, with children, especially if they're targeted, bad actors will usually threaten them in some way and say, I'm going to harm your mom or dad, so don't say anything or else you'll get in trouble, right? And so talking to them about if that comes into play, it's kind of like how I say, when kids are of age and start to drink and you're like, or, at that point, you're like, it's okay to call me, like, and I have to come and pick you up and bring you home. I'd rather do that than have some other, bad accident happen. So have those conversations, monitor their social media accounts, if your kids will let you, understand what they're doing, monitor not even your kids' social media, monitor your parents' social media accounts, monitor your grandparents' social media accounts. And just continue those conversations, make it just kind of normal, par for the course, highlight security issues or concerns so people are aware of what's going on. With Blackhawk, we try to do a lot of education and awareness around different cyber scams and things going on, so our member base has ideas of what's happening out there and can be educated in those things top of mind. I know we have about 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I'm going to start here. One of, I think we all deal with is those lovely spam calls and text messages. And so for those of you that have iPhones, if you want to pull out your iPhone here and you find, the gear icon in your iPhone settings, when you hit that gear icon, if you scroll down to the bottom where it says apps, and then in apps, you scroll and it's alphabetical, you scroll down to the P and find phone. In phone, there's two things. This is, I think, an older image. If you're on the older iOS, if you are on the new iOS 26, it's going to look slightly different, and we didn't have those updated screens here. But there is an option, and it's called call filtering, call monitoring, where you can silence unknown callers or Also, call screening is another one in the new iOS 26 that you'll see. You can give an option to have callers that are not in your contact list state why they're calling to you. So you see a transcript of that before actually answering the phone. This is the new built-in features. There's other third-party apps out there on the market, RoboKiller, NomoRobo, or a couple of those that operate like this. But I'd say I always like to start with the built-in features first. And if those don't work, then kind of moving off to another third-party solution. But you can do this with the phone, so you can silence unknown callers altogether. You can filter, and also you can do the same sort of concept with the messages app as well. So as this one shows apps to phone, you can go apps to messages, and you can filter out, spam messages into a separate box so it doesn't, conflict with the main text messages that you get. So it's just a really kind of good first step on combating all of those unwanted spam calls, because one might say, well, Ingrid, I did the data broker sites and I'm still getting, text, or texts or phone calls, right? And I'm like, well, more than likely they've had your phone number from a breach on the dark web, and you can't remove information from the dark web. So it's going to continue to come in. And some might also say, I've had folks say, well, I've put my name in the do not call list. I'm like, well, that's for telemarketers and companies that actually adhere to the law. And we know bad guys, cyber criminals, they don't adhere to the law, right? So they're going to still bombard you regardless. And then, Grant, I want to pause and just see, because I know I want to make sure we leave for time. We do have some Instagram hardening slides that we can go through, and some for Facebook. I can also have these sent separately as a follow-up. So I don't know if we want to pause and see what questions we have. And if there aren't any questions, we can go through this, some more practical examples.
Yeah, thanks, Ingrid. And we did have a question that came in that was just around, what are the most common online scams for kids? You talked a little bit about what, obviously the kids are on more internet, more technology. And so you went through some of those, touched on some social media specifically. And so maybe this is a good opportunity to answer that question. And as they asked, just what are the most common online scams or threats targeting families right now, specifically kids? So, maybe we kind of did some, I don't know if you have any on Facebook or you have some on Instagram, but if you could speak to that issue, that was one of the questions we had.
Yeah, well, I would say, as we know, a lot of kids are into their apps, the gaming apps, games like the Roblox and other things. And a lot of that, where they absolutely love, is not just playing the game, but it's talking to other people's on that platform, right? And so they're in either like Discord chats or the Roblox chats, talking to individuals, and they don't know the age of the user or anything. And so they think that they're talking to someone else that's their age, who might ask them a question and, and they suddenly slowly build a relationship, gain that trust. And so really it's in that aspect, it's having the conversations with children to say, like, if you're making a friend on, Roblox or whatnot, let us know. It's cool that you're making friends, but we want to make sure that they're legitimate and they're not a scary person trying to get information, because then it kind of ends up turning into like, oh, I like you, I think you're cute, or send me this information, or oh, can you share this detail, or what's your password for this, right? And then they suddenly get into an access into an account. And what we also see within households, especially with password management practices, it is not uncommon for family members to all leverage a similar password, or a variation, whether you're a sports fan household and you all like the same team, and suddenly, like, I'm from the New England area, so I'm going to say like the Red Sox, or the Celtics. But other aspects is, you might be like, love all your pets, and all of your your passwords are pet names, right? And the family members use it. I've seen that happen before. Or the parents use their passwords are their kids' names, maybe the kid's date of birth, also associated with it. So you have to be careful of what the kid's sharing. So I would say a lot of it is targeting on those conversation points of those gaming platforms in particular.
Gotcha. That's a great point. It's not just the messages themselves, but the people getting involved in it. So yeah, that was one of the questions. One of the other questions was, I'm not super tech savvy. So what are a few simple practical steps that I can do around making my house safer? You mentioned some of those things. I think, to this point, to the question here that was asked during the middle of the presentation, like you said, it's constant. it's keeping up to date. It's how often do I need to check and go back and check and recheck. So for the people that aren't as tech savvy or maybe don't have the extra time to do it, what would be a good cadence or what would be a good kind of system that they could use to make sure that they're being proactive without being paranoid?
Yeah. So I would say, I think that probably maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months, going in and checking and making sure that your devices are up to date, that you've gone ahead and pushed, updated the firmware on various things. You've checked your Wi-Fi network, if anything's changed, stuff like that. Probably like every 3 to 4 months or 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, and obviously whenever there's something that changes, and that's
Mhm.
probably the opportunity where it slips through the cracks the most of all of a sudden they forgot to make what was safe is now not safe. So
Yeah, and actually you say when things change or when new things are introduced into the household. So even like around like holidays in particular with, Christmas and all the holidays at the end of this year coming up and the new year, people are getting and receiving a lot of gifts, and a lot of things might be new bits of technology that they're now bringing into the home. So going through, and that's another thing. Keep in mind when you get new devices or new pieces of software, that around the end of December timeframe, some of these things might have been purchased at the end of November, beginning of November, and they might have sat in the box for a while. So first thing to do when you pull out that new device, make sure you go through, check for software updates, checks for any other updates, and do those first. And so anytime you get a new device, it's a good idea.
great, great. We had a couple additional questions that came in, so I'll just kind of go down the line here. You mentioned kind of name scrubbers around what name scrubbers for data brokers do you recommend?
Yep. So there are a few out there. As I mentioned, Black Cloak does it. As if you are a member of Black Cloak, we will do that. But also if you're just looking for a particular, data broker removal service, there's Optry. Delete Me is a common one in the space. If you have LifeLock, LifeLock does, I think, have an offering for the data broker removal piece as well. So something to, leverage if you are currently using that. But those are a couple of the bigger names in that area.
Great. And that same person said, in terms of anti-malware, is there a certain standard, certain group of anti-malware companies that you would recommend?
So, I would say the common ones, McAfee, Sophos, Malwarebytes, and Norton are all like good consumer grade products. If you have access to a more robust like enterprise proprietary solution, and that's like the one thing that with Blackhawk we do offer that higher level. And I'll just caveat with the reason why an enterprise grade solutions much more secure is those consumer grade products out there, again, better than nothing. Those consumer grade products will kind of they monitor based on a list of known viruses so that the industry keeps up to date, right? Or mostly up to date. And so they'll check when something runs on your machine, does it match something on the list that we're checking for, right? And if it matches, it'll stop it. If it doesn't match, it more than likely will allow it through, right? But some of the enterprise grade solutions that are out there, they're not just leveraging the list, they're using a combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence to look and see how does the file or the program or the request behave. Did malware get installed and is it beaconing out to different devices? Does something want higher level privileges on your computer that would be abnormal? And it will automatically quarantine and flag and mark it suspicious or lock it down entirely for your safety. So that's really where the difference is. And with a consumer grade product, if you're tech savvy, you can probably figure it out. But when something pops up and says like, we quarantine this, and you're like, what does quarantine mean? And do I want to unquarantine it? Do I want to leave it quarantined? What do I do? And what even we've seen is that even some of the best antivirus, antimalware products on the market, they might quarantine a portion of it, but there still might be remnants that were not able to be quarantined or stuck or super sticky that you have to like manually exfiltrate off of a machine. And so that's just something else to keep in mind.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's great answers on that. One of the other questions I wanted to ask in conjunction with that is if someone feels like something has been breached, or they've given away data they weren't supposed to, or they clicked on something, like what is their first step? Now, naturally, they should be Black Cloak clients and they should call you. But if they're not, what would be a first step? I know there's a couple of different versions of attacks. Maybe you have an answer for different first steps for different things.
Yeah, and I would say it definitely is nuanced and on a case by case basis, but I would say if you've handed over any sort of personal information, like your social security number, date of birth, other things that could be leveraged to extend credit in your name, filing a fraud alert with the credit reporting agencies. So Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. With a fraud alert, you only have to notify one, and you can do so like through their website online, and they are required then to tell the other two. And that adds a flag on your account for companies so that if someone were to go and say, want to like open up a credit card in your name or a car or something like that, and the agency runs the credit, it's going to say, oh, there's a fraud alert for this individual. I need to do some additional due diligence and verification and authenticating the user that's requesting, this, line of credit of sorts. That doesn't stop them from it. The other thing would be immediately going in and putting credit freezes on with the big three credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. It is also a good idea to report that identity theft in fraud to the FTC. So there's a identitytheft.gov FTC reporting site that you can go to and notify them. All that does is it goes into their records that it happened. There's no other additional action, but it's good for them to know because if the FTC or the FBI, so some people might even take it a step further and go and report to the Internet Crimes Complaint Center, the IC3, that report that I, at the beginning of this, session that we talked about, reporting to them, because if the government or, any sort of investigative agencies are looking at some wider sort of criminal network operating, they might take that information and then potentially reach out to you at a later point in time, knowing that you had been a victim. So I would say personal information, that's it. If you've given them access to, like in the case of my family member, in addition to being on the phone and handing over personal information, right? She told them where she banked. She told them the amount that she had in her account. And she gave them the last four of her social so that they had all the requisite information needed to call up the bank, report to be her, unfortunately. And so it was an immediate call the bank, let them know that you've been targeted, as a victim of an attack and that your accounts could be at risk, and work with them for some additional verification and authentication measures and put a flag on your account so that they know that there could be something suspicious. And if you've given passwords, anywhere that you're using that password, you might have a lot of homework depending upon your password management practices of going through and changing those passwords almost immediately, and start with those key accounts again, right? Email, financial, healthcare, social media. I'd go in that route.
All right. Great. Just we'll kind of do one more here, a fun one. Someone asked, it seems like my TV and phone listen in on my conversations. Is there a way to stop this? I know I wonder this sometimes. So is there a way to stop that? Is there a setting or anything that we can enable to just feel a little more safe when it comes to that?
Yeah, that's actually, a really good question. I would say that there are, like, the Siri on my phone, right? You have it turned on because there's a convenience factor when you need it, but that means it's always listening. Your Amazon Alexas, right, are always listening to you in the background, whether you have it on. So turning some of those things off. There are also within various settings, like Apple, for example, when you go into the, the settings app, and you can go down to, I think it's general and privacy and security, there's a piece in there for like the advertising and marketing piece, right? And so as Siri's listening to you, or you're visiting certain websites, or going and, whether it's on your TV and maybe you're using YouTube and watching something, and then suddenly you get ads that pop up that are relative, that's kind of that advertising marketing, you can kind of turn off the ability for them to use search results or other things so that you can't get targeted in that way. But yes, there is a lot that's listening.
Great. Well, those were all of our questions. And so, big thank you for everyone joining us today for Cyber Hygiene 101. And a big thanks to Ingrid for sharing her insights and practical tips to help protect our families and, from all the online attacks and mischief that happens out there. So if you're interested in learning more about Black Cloak and their services, their contact information, I think Ingrid has a page that she can go to here. And if you don't worry about writing it down quickly, because that information will be shared with an email where we provide the recording for this webinar today. And so that'll come out here in the next week or so. And if you find this content on similar platforms for us, whether it be in our Wealth and Purpose podcast on YouTube or past webinars, both with Black Cloak and other professional groups that provide expertise in other areas, those will be found on tfowealth.com. So with that, thank you, Ingrid. Thank you to your team. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our webinar. Have a great week.
Thank you.